Hi, my name is Brittany J. Jones. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to sew princess seams. Let's get started. To demonstrate sewing princess seams, I will be using these two pattern pieces here. This pattern is from Simplicity 9576, and I have the bodice front as well as the bodice side front. When working with princess seams, it is important that you transfer your notches. As you can see on the pattern piece here, there are 2 notches on each pattern and they correspond to each other. Now this can be kind of confusing when it's time to put these 2 pieces together to pin them in place. That's why it is so important that you remember to transfer these notches. To begin, the first thing that we're going to do is apply some stay stitching between the notches on both sides of our bodice front. So just between the notches that we transferred, we are going to do a 1/2 inch of stay stitching. The stay stitching will allow us to do a little bit of clipping if necessary so we can spread the fabric so that it's able to fit here nicely along the side bodice once we put those pieces together. So again, to get started, we're going to go ahead and do some stay stitching, a 1/2 inch seam allowance right here between the notches that we transferred. Okay, I've just done my stay stitching. Again, we stay stitch on a 1/2 inch seam allowance between the notches that we transferred on the bodice front. So now with right sides facing, I'm going to go ahead and grab my side bodice front and we're going to pin it right sides facing, matching up our notches. So I'm going to grab my pins and start pinning, matching up my notches first. Okay, I have my 2 notches matched up. I'm going to go ahead and continue pinning, and then we're going to address this curve right here and how we can get everything to line up nice and neat. So I'm going to continue pinning the rest of the seam here. All right, now that we have the remaining seam pinned, now we can come back here to the curve. And as you can see, the raw edges, they don't quite meet up, not as nice and neat as we would like. If you try to force it, you can see you get ripples here. And this side right here is not quite smooth as well. And so the reason why we did the stay stitching is because we can clip on the other side of the fabric. We can place some clips here up to our stay stitching line. We don't want to go past it, we just want to go up to it. And because we did this on a 1/2 inch seam allowance, it's not going to interfere with our 5/8 of an inch seam line. So I'm just going to place a few clips right here. And again, that's just going to help the fabric to move a little bit more so that we can match it up with our curve and pin it so that when we sew it, it'll be nice and smooth. By placing those clips in, you can see that the fabric spreads open already so much better, and that is what we want. So that is why it's important to not only transfer those markings, but to also do the stay stitching, because we can clip up to that stay stitching and that will allow the fabric to spread open so then we can pin it better to the curve here on our side bodice. Now I'm just going to continue pinning in place, matching up my raw edges. Now that we have this side pinned, we're going to do the same exact step to the other side. And once we have them both pinned, we can stitch on a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I have just stitched both side bodice fronts onto the bodice front here. And so this is what it looks like. This is the inside and this is the outside. The next most important thing for us to do is to press our seam. So let's go ahead and talk about pressing. When pressing our seams, we're going to be pressing them going toward the bodice. So we want our seams to be coming in like so. One thing that you don't want to do is just go to your ironing station and just start to press your seam flat. As you can see, this does have a curve to it, and we want to keep that curve intact. One thing that you can do to press curves, such as this princess seam on this bodice, is to use a pressing ham. And what you do is just place your seam right along the curve of this, and you will give it a nice press, making sure that the seam allowance is going toward the bodice front like so. If you do not have a pressing ham, you can use a towel. Just roll up your towel, have a curve on it so it's taking the same shape as your seam here, and just place it under there and go ahead and press your seam going toward the bodice. So again, you can use a pressing ham to press your seams with curves. Again, we're pressing this toward the bodice front. If you do not have a pressing ham, you can use a towel. Okay, I've just finished pressing my seam going toward the front, and this is what it looks like on the outside of my fabric here. As you can see, by using the curve of the ham, it helps to keep the shape of the bodice, and that's going to make it fit even better on the body once the garment is finished. And this is what it looks like on the inside here. As you can see, I have pressed my seams going toward the front. And depending on the type of fabric that you're working with, you may need to add more clips into your curves just to make sure everything is laying nice and flat. By all means, go ahead and add more clips if you need to, and then just make sure that you press your seams going toward the bodice front. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration of seeing how to sew princess seams.